So after over 20 Virgin Voyages, I know by now all of the shows, all of the restaurants, every cocktail and every venue on each of the 4 Virgin Voyages ships. But I have to admit, outside of Virgin Voyages, our experience with the other Virgin Group brands is pretty limited. We don't live next to an airport that's served by Virgin Atlantic, and even the trains that we get in our part of the UK are not served by Virgin Trains. So actually, it was a real delight to be asked along by Virgin Hotels to come and see one of their properties. And we were really interested to see how the Virgin experience would translate from what we know at sea onto land and vice versa. And what we found actually grounded our understanding of the Virgin Group in general. And I want to tell you about those little touches that we noticed that carry across from what we noticed on Virgin Voyages and how that plays out in the hotel. So let me show you what we found in Virgin Hotels Shoreditch and tell you whether we think a Virgin hotel is a good place to stay before your Virgin Voyages cruise and how that might change your vacation. So let's take an inside look at Virgin Hotels London Shoreditch. VV Insider is the #1 resource for the latest Virgin Voyages info, guides and news. From picking the perfect cabin to booking dining or simply just making the most of your voyage and saving money while you do it, VVinsider.com has helped thousands of sailors around the world sail smarter. Support our work by hitting subscribe and stick around to hear how you can get exclusive perks by booking directly with us. For those that don't know much about Virgin Hotels, and we certainly didn't before we went along, is that Richard Branson himself was actually planning this brand from 2010, and it took 5 years from that point for them to open their first property. So what led to that delay before they opened their first property in Chicago? Well, it's all down to Branson's refusal to launch the brand until they'd completely rediscovered what hotels are all about. And an area where this is really clear is the fact that they actually went to the effort to patent a lot of the design and processes that went into the hotel, even down to their unique room design, something they call the chamber. So on Virgin Voyages, you have your cabin, and in the Virgin Hotels, you have your chamber. So when Virgin Hotels launched in Chicago, the chamber was the first hotel room design that always included a privacy door between the dressing room and the bedroom. They also went into every pain point that travelers generally have. So things like slow Wi-Fi, hidden resort fees, overpriced minibars, and long lines at the check-in queue. So although they took this painstaking amount of time to get the Chicago hotel right, it was obviously worth it because Condé Nast actually named the Virgin Hotel in Chicago the best hotel for 7 years in a row. So right now there are 8 Virgin hotels. The majority of them are in the USA. So they have locations in Chicago, Dallas, Las Vegas, Nashville, New Orleans, and New York City, with a Miami location due to launch in 2026. And there are also 2 Virgin hotels in the UK, one in Edinburgh, and of course the one that we visited, which is in London in Shoreditch. Now the Shoreditch location itself has a bit of a fascinating past. The building itself was actually the Mondrian Shoreditch, which was a completely different hotel brand that couldn't quite find its identity in the location that it was in. That's when Virgin Hotels took it over and began transforming it, leading to Virgin Hotels London opening its doors in August 2024. But here's an interesting part. The brand didn't actually consider it complete until April 2025, which is when Richard Branson visited the property himself to open the on-property bar called Hidden Grooves. Hidden Grooves is actually touted as London's only hi-fi listening bar, and Sir Richard Branson actually designed it himself. It's a 38-seat vinyl listening lounge that acts as a love letter to Virgin Records' 50-year history. But we will get onto that in just a moment. But why Shoreditch? Well, this neighbourhood was actually London's industrial wasteland back in the 80s. From warehouses to print works and abandoned factories, it was a little bit down and out, and that's when artists started moving into the area. The artists moved in because rent was cheap, and it was a place for them to start practicing their craft, and they started to open galleries. And then the tech community started moving in as well, until present day, where it's East London's creative epicenter. The likes of Banksy does street art here, there are vintage markets every weekend, and it even has more independent coffee shops per square mile than anywhere else in London. It also means that Virgin Hotels London Shoreditch is only 10 minutes away from Liverpool Street. So that's a really quick walk to the Elizabeth line, so you can get to Heathrow Airport really quick, which is actually a boon for cruise passengers like us who might be flying down the day before. It won't take you too long to get to the hotel, And then you can go down to Portsmouth or Southampton the following day, which is exactly what we did. All right, so after 20 plus Virgin Voyages, we know the check-in experience off by heart. You go to the port, you drop off your bags, you check in, you get your sailor band, and you're ready to go. It's a really frictionless experience, and this is an ethos that Virgin Hotel have tried to keep as well. So instead of waiting at the reception for a long time, they have an app called the Lucy app, which is the name that's given to the in-room entertainment experience as well. And the idea here is that you download the Lucy app, you can check in on there. So all you need to do is pick up your room key, which is a very nicely designed, and unfortunately I've lost mine, but it's a very nicely designed red playing card that you use as your room key. Now, unfortunately, I could not get the Lucy app to work with our reservation. It could have been something to do with the way it was booked, but I'm not entirely sure. But according to the Virgin Hotels website, the idea here is that you can use the Lucy app to control the in-room entertainment and the in-room lighting, for example. And anyone who's been on Virgin Voyages will know that this is very similar to the experience that you get inside of your cabin, because you're also able to change the lighting and the entertainment from the tablet inside your cabin. So the only difference here is that it will be on your phone on an app instead of the tablet in the cabin. Now again, we couldn't get this to work, but in theory, it sounds very similar to the Virgin Voyages experience if it worked. But of course, we're quite familiar with the Virgin Voyages Sailor app. And it appears that this is something that the Virgin Group and the Virgin brand in general are trying to make sure that a lot of these experiences and these interactions that you need to do are done digitally on the app. And of course, this is a push that we've heard a lot of feedback about from sailors across the Virgin Voyages community. So let me know your thoughts in the comments about what you think about apps for hotels. If you're asked to download it as part of your experience and you have no choice, what do you think about that? Let me know in the comments, because I know Virgin Voyages sailors have a big opinion on this. So after we checked in, we were able to have a look around at the lobby and the common areas in the hotel. And one thing I will say about the London Shoreditch location is the lobby was very, very small. It was very nicely designed, very pretty, and it was very comfortable, but it is very small. So it's not somewhere that you could just go and hang out in. But in a true Virgin way, they have explained this experience in this way, where they call this a space that morphs throughout the day. And they tout this as like a coffee lounge in the morning, somewhere to work in the afternoons, and then like a late night hangout spot. In theory, this just felt a little bit like a corridor, but there was a nice interlude off to the side, which was this mirrored room, which I guess was kind of like an Instagram selfie spot that had these red roses. That was fairly interesting, and it did remind me of the Manor corridor on the ship. If you've been on board Virgin Voyages, this is a very popular Instagram spot. So that was definitely something that we noticed that was shared across the Virgin Voyages and the Virgin Hotels experience. Something that we noticed in general when we were going around these common areas was just about how well this suited the overall sort of Virgin look and feel. So if you've been on the ship, you know this style of interior decorating, the things like the indoor plants and the lighting and these sculptural mirrored elements. These are the kind of things that we saw in the London Virgin Hotel, as well as some of the fixtures and fittings on the ship. So there was definitely some interplay there. Now, when we were hunting around the common areas, we noticed on the lift, there was a sign that said the Manor. And we were like, oh, well, the Manor must be the nightclub because it's the nightclub on Virgin Voyages. So it must be the nightclub here. It turns out it was just a meeting room. But when we asked about this to the spa receptionist, she told us that actually the Manor is the name of Richard Branson's original recording studio for Virgin Records. I have to apologise because I can't believe we got to this point in our Virgin journey without knowing that, but it seems a salient piece of information that a lot of people behind the Virgin brand know. If only somebody could have told us. Now, I will say we visited the Virgin Hotel on a Sunday night, which means that unfortunately the venues in the hotel weren't hosting any nighttime entertainment. But we were lucky enough to be given a little tour of those spaces that would have been available if we arrived on maybe a Friday or a Saturday night. And as you can see here, the design of these spaces for this nightclub style area is absolutely incredible, with these really unique touches that really make it feel like a proper Virgin experience. And this even carried through to the gym as well. So the gym was actually made out of the old hotel's library room. And you can see the features and fixtures here were just reminiscent of this old-fashioned library. It's a really interesting concept for a gym. And although I'm not a gym goer myself, I'm sure there are worse places to be working out than this really cool and funky interior design space. So let's talk a little bit about the rooms, or should I say the chambers, at the Virgin Hotel. So we were lucky enough to get the keys to 2 different types of rooms. And a few notes about all the rooms before we get into these different types is that every single room comes with a steam shower. So every single chamber and every single suite has a shower which also acts as a steam room. So there is no steam room in the gym, but you're very welcome to use the one that comes in your room. So the idea here is that you activate the steam function, and after 90 seconds, steam will start to leave the outlet and you'll have this aromatherapy style steam room available in your room 24/7. This is definitely something that doesn't happen on board the ships. This is very much a Virgin Hotels thing. This might be something that is just hyper local to the London Shoreditch one, but is a really nice feature of the rooms. And if you're a fan of a steam room, having one available whenever you feel like it when you're staying in the hotel is such an incredible thing. It's also worth saying that in this Virgin Hotel in London, all of the rooms are pet friendly. And as much as we'd absolutely have loved to bring Cody along on this journey, unfortunately we were stepping on board the ship the next day, so unfortunately he had to stay at home this time. All of the rooms as well have this iconic red Smeg minibar fridge. The minibar itself is not normally complimentary unless you have a suite, but the options available from the minibar and the snacks available as well, with a huge selection. Every room comes with a Marshall Bluetooth speaker as well if you want to put your own tunes on, as well as a Lavazza pod coffee machine as well, so you can make fresh coffee whenever you want. There is of course all the features that you would normally expect, so you get an iron and an ironing board, you get an in-room safe, and the entertainment on the TV is all included as well. So the first room we were able to get a look at was called the Grand Chamber King. So this was 275 square foot and had a king bed. The bed itself is incredibly comfortable. From what I've read, Virgin Hotels have put a huge amount of work into selecting the perfect beds for their hotels, and it really pays off. These are really, really comfortable beds. And there was also kind of an odd feature, but it came in pretty handy. At the edge of the bed and one of the corners, there's this almost seat style area. I think they call it the playpen, but actually it was really useful when we were just trying to sit with friends and enjoy a bit of a catch up. It was actually a nice place to just sit and have a nice conversation. So what looks like a really quirky bed design is actually quite practical, especially when that chamber itself didn't have a huge amount of space to just sit and kick back with friends. So actually using the bed is just easy enough. So that is the standard room experience at the Virgin Hotel London Shoreditch. But we were actually really fortunate enough to get our eyes on one of the 1-bedroom suites also available. And all I can really compare this to on the Virgin spectrum is a mega rockstar suite, because this room was absolutely fantastic. So this room on the website says it was 575 square feet. I think the layout of our particular suite was even bigger than that. And what you get at this level is an entire separate living area with a sofa, armchair, space to work, huge TV, got a whole section with a mini bar and a kitchenette. And then the bedroom itself is absolutely vast. Vast enough for a roll-top bath, which is actually inside of the bedroom itself, with a whole host of luxury toiletries to use as well. An absolutely huge amount of storage, and then the bathroom was absolutely vast with 2 sinks. Now, we've been lucky enough to sail in Mega Rockstar once before on Virgin Voyages, although our gorgeous suite was nowhere near as huge and as luxurious as this suite at the London Hotel. We had an absolutely lovely night in this suite with our friends, and we were able to really enjoy all the space that it had to offer. Is this something that we would normally book? Well, we're not quite in that tax bracket, but this was an incredible experience, and if we had the money, we absolutely would again. Absolutely incredible place to stay in London. Our only complaints really with this room are very, very minor, but it always counts when you're traveling, and that's to do with the electric sockets. There was absolutely no electric sockets to use by the bed whatsoever. We had to charge all of our devices away from the bed, which if you're a traveler and you need to get up in the morning and you're setting alarms, it's a real pain. But other than that, it was an absolutely lovely stay. Now, in terms of what you can get up to in the evening in the Virgin Hotel in Shoreditch, it's probably best for us to go down to the Hidden Grooves bar again. And I think really this is what sets apart the Virgin Hotel from everything else that you might see in Shoreditch. And as I mentioned before, this opened in April 2025, and that was 8 months after the hotel itself launched. And that was because Richard Branson wanted it to be absolutely perfect. And he said when he designed it, he actually decided exactly what records were going to be inside of the bar. He wanted to design exactly how the listening stations were going to work and exactly how the vibe would play out. The whole aesthetic is inspired by 1970s hi-fi, with wavy patterns and high gloss finishes and vintage furniture. It's designed to feel like a cool uncle's living room. It's essentially nostalgia from Virgin Records' glory days. The vinyl collection spans from Virgin Records' entire record collection, from the Sex Pistols, the Rolling Stones, Culture Club, Janet Jackson to Phil Collins. And these aren't reproduction records, these are the real deal. So the idea is that you can take these records to listening stations that has project audio hi-fi equipment. You pick the records, you put your headphones on, and you experience the music just as Branson intended, with full fidelity, no compression, the full album experience. And the cocktails in the bar are even inspired by Virgin Records itself. So we saw on the menu one called Nevermind, which was inspired by the Sex Pistols album. And the idea is that the menu is dynamic. So the actual recipe of the menus change depending on the mixologist. We were told about their weekly events that are hosted at Hidden Grooves, including a weekly listening event with guest DJs, live music programming, and something called Discovery Hours, where the staff recommend deep cuts from the record collection. Now, in terms of dining, unfortunately, our schedules didn't align with the dining offered at the hotel, but we did enjoy a really delicious rooftop breakfast before we headed down to Portsmouth to join Brilliant Lady. And the food and coffee were really delicious. On the rooftop as well, there is a rooftop pool. The pool itself is very small, I will say, but if you come from Virgin Voyages, we're quite used to a small swimming pool, are we not? But you do get those rooftop views across Shoreditch. And because this rooftop is operated by Blue Marlin Ibiza, in the evenings expect to see some live DJ sets where you can enjoy some cocktails under the stars. So after over 20 plus Virgin Voyages under our belt, what did we think of the Virgin Hotels experience on land? Well, there was definitely a few things that we noticed that you can compare one for one with the Virgin Voyages experience. So there is no nickel and diming, so that's nice to see. They're not asking for tips or gratuities on top of anything, but that might be a London specific thing. But we were never pressured to give a service charge or gratuities at any point. We also noticed the tech-forward design, so they want you to use the app for you to book experiences or make changes to things. So that's definitely some of that Virgin DNA being shared there. There's definitely that upscale casual vibe. Although we were sweet guests, we never felt the need to dress up in shirt and trousers at any point. It was just coolly and casually luxurious, just like we noticed when we step on board the ship as well. Now, of course, it's worth saying this is not Virgin Voyages on land. So it's not an all-inclusive experience where you're getting food included. There isn't a number of restaurants that you can visit every single night. There is unfortunately no happenings cast, so there's not a huge number of events that you can go to all the time. But one thing that really does shine through in the Virgin Hotels experience is just that real Virgin ethos that you know from the ships. So if you love the design, if you love the vibes, and you simply want to take some of that sparkle from the ship onto land, I would really recommend trying Virgin Hotels out. They're certainly not some of the cheapest hotels that you're going to stay in, so it has to be worth your while. But if you're looking for something as a little bit of a treat, I definitely recommend it. The one thing I will say is that if you're trying to combine your Virgin Voyages experience with your Virgin Hotels experience, right now there is no real way to do that. We kind of had some proximity between London and Portsmouth. It's only an hour and a half on the train, but there's not that many sailings from Portsmouth anyway. The one thing that we are looking out for is the launch of Virgin Hotels Miami, which promises to just be about 10 minutes away from Terminal V. So if we're lucky enough to be invited along to the Virgin Hotels experience in Miami, we can certainly give you an idea of what to expect when you combine your Virgin Voyages experience with the Virgin Hotel experience. I think that's where we're going to really see that brand synergy come in. And when it comes to pricing, hotels are very different from cruise ships. We all know this. You're having to pay that London premium. It's around about £300 a night for that original room that I showed you, the King Chamber. And for the suite that we were able to stay in, normally that runs at around about £800 to £900 a night. So that's over $1,000 US. But if you think even about the King Chamber room, what you're paying per night for the hotel is actually probably more than what you would pay for a Virgin Voyage. And let's not forget, on a Virgin Voyage, you get your food and entertainment all included as well. So in terms of value for money, I think Virgin Voyages is always going to win in that regard, but hotels are always going to be a very different proposition to cruise ships. The one thing I will mention as well about Virgin Voyages and why we would always choose a Virgin Voyage 7-night stay over a Virgin Hotel 7-night stay is that you do have that sailor community. Everyone is going through the same experience when you step on board the cruise ship. So from sail away to PJ party to Scarlet Night and even the final night and disembarkation, all of the sailors are going through all of that together. And that's where you can really meet some lifelong friends. And you're really never going to get that experience in a hotel. So maybe if you've watched this video from the hotel perspective, maybe I can win you over on the Virgin Voyage experience. And if I've done that, then VV Insider is the place for you to go to find out even more about the Virgin Voyages experience. And I do videos like this telling you everything you need to know about Virgin Voyages and how to make the most out of it. So if you found any of this interesting from the cruise side, then do follow along, stay subscribed to vvinsider.com. And if you're ready to make a booking, there is no better place to book than vvinsider.com, because we're the only place that not only do we have all this incredible expert information, but we also give you double loyalty with our Red Diamond Club. So if you book your voyage on vvinsider.com, you'll get free membership to our Red Diamond Club, where you can earn diamonds for every time that you sail. And you can spend that on things like onboard credits. So you're getting rewarded every time you sail. So don't miss out. It doesn't cost you any more to book with VV Insider than it does if you book direct or with any other first mate. So make sure if you're planning your next voyage, you come straight to us. And what's more, you'll be supporting all the work that we do here at VV Insider. So thanks for coming along on our little trip to Virgin Hotels London Shoreditch today. But until next time, happy sailing.